courtyard is silent, except for the slow, deliberate crunch of the executioner's sandals on baked clay. His hands, stained with ochre and sweat, grip the curved bronze blades as if they are an extension of his own will. In the distance, the low hum of temple chants bleeds into the dry, unforgiving air. The prisoner, stripped to the waist, stands against the towering mud-brick wall, his shadow stretching thin and trembling in the morning sun. A priest's voice rises above the murmurs, invoking the gods of war and vengeance, names that have tasted blood for centuries. Few outside the palace grounds will ever know the details of what happens next. The Assyrian Empire, vast and unyielding, is built not only on conquest but on a calculated theatre of cruelty. And in this theatre, the most feared act is not the sword's swift mercy, but the slow, methodical unmaking of a man's body while he still breathes. This is not a punishment for the petty or the common. It is a royal performance reserved for enemies of the throne, rebels who dared to defy the king, and emissaries whose loyalty cracked under pressure. To witness it is to understand the weight of Assyrian power and the price of challenging it. If you enjoy uncovering history's darker chapters, remember to like and subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The prisoner's eyes dart between the priest and the executioner, the air thick with the smell of oil, dust, and fear. Somewhere beyond the walls, the empire moves on his march. Merchants haggle, children play, unaware that within this sun-baked square, a man's flesh will soon be peeled away, layer by layer, as an offering to both justice and terror. The new Assyrian Empire, at its height between the 9th and 7th centuries BCE, was a sprawling dominion stretching from the mountains of Anatolia to the sands of Egypt. Its kings' names like Ashur-nasir-pal-sehen, Tidlath-Piles III, and Ashur-banipal were not only rulers, but living embodiments of divine authority. They governed through a potent combination of religious legitimacy, military precision, and a reputation for ruthless, imaginative punishments. In this world, war was not a matter of mere victory and defeat, it was a stage upon which dominance was displayed. Cities that resisted were razed, their surviving leaders brought in chains to the Assyrian capitals of Nineveh, Kalhu, or Dur-Sharrukin. The rulers understood something fundamental: fear could cross borders faster than any army, and stories of cruelty could conquer cities before a single soldier arrived. Flaying, the slow removal of skin, was among their most infamous punishments. It was not random barbarity, but a calculated ritual with political purpose. Assyrian relief carvings, still preserved in museums today, depict bound captives with strips of skin hanging from their bodies, while scribes record the deed for the annals of the king. These records were not hidden away, they were public. Inscriptions on palace walls, carved in stone for all to see. The process often took place in open courtyards or at the city gates, places chosen for their visibility. Victims might be displayed before the gathered populace, their bodies prepared with oil to make the blade's path cleaner, their fates sealed by royal decree. Sometimes the flayed skin was nailed to the city walls, a grim banner warning others. This was more than execution, it was a performance of state power, a brutal language that spoke directly to the subjects and enemies of Assyria alike. And it worked. Rebellions were rare in cities that had seen the pale, weathered skin of former leaders fluttering in the wind. The sun hangs mercilessly over the palace courtyard of Nineveh, its heat radiating off the walls like an oven. On this day, the assembled crowd is unusually large: officials, soldiers, temple servants, and a select number of foreign envoys brought here not for entertainment, but for instruction. The king himself, seated beneath a canopy of embroidered linen, watches with an expression as still and unmoving as the colossal winged bulls that guard the gates. The condemned man is a rebel chieftain from the city of Shuru, captured after a siege that left his people starving and desperate. His crime is not merely rebellion, it is defiance against the divine order the king claims to embody. In Assyria, such an offense cannot be erased by a simple beheading. It demands a lesson carved into flesh. The executioner steps forward, his bronze blade glinting. He begins not with a killing stroke, but with a shallow, precise incision near the shoulder, letting the crowd see how the skin loosens under his practiced hand. The victim's sharp intake of breath cuts through the murmured prayers. Two assistants hold him upright with cords looped around his wrists, ensuring he cannot collapse too soon. As the first strip is pulled away, the scribe seated at a low table records each movement on a clay tablet, just as he will later inscribe it in stone. The text will boast of the king's wrath and the fate of those who defy him, written for generations to read. In time, that stone will adorn the palace walls, where foreign emissaries will walk past and silently absorb the warning. The priest chants blessings to Shamash, god of justice, and to Ashur, the empire's patron deity. Every cut, every pull, is framed as an offering not to satisfy bloodlust, but to restore cosmic order. The man's legs tremble, but the cords keep him in place. The crowd watches, rapt, as pain becomes a political message. When the torso is nearly bare of skin, the executioner pauses. The heat is intense, the smell of oil mingles with the iron tang of blood, though here in the telling, we spare the true details that no inscription ever dared to fully capture. What matters is not the gore, but the permanence of the act. The strips are collected and will be taken to the outer gates of the city, there to be nailed in place, as an enduring emblem of the king's triumph. The rebel is not granted a swift end. Sometimes, victims are left alive for hours, even days, until death comes of its own accord. It is said, though the truth is hard to confirm, that in certain cases, a surviving captive might be displayed to passing dignitaries, his body a living testament to Assyrian justice. Whether this is embellishment or fact, the rumor itself is as potent as reality. Beyond Nineveh, news travels fast. Traders carry the story along caravan routes, adding details with each retelling. By the time it reaches a distant city-state, the rebel's name is less important than the method of his end. Governors who hear the tale imagine themselves in his place, and their loyalty stiffens. Years later, in the reign of Ashurbanipal, the practice continues. One inscription proudly records, "I flayed the nobles who had rebelled and spread their skins upon the wall." The bluntness of the statement leaves little room for interpretation. For the Assyrian kings, cruelty is not a flaw, it is a tool, honed and deliberate, wielded in the service of empire. And so the ritual becomes a fixture of Assyrian statecraft, embedded in their visual culture and political strategy. The walls of their palaces speak in stone, "Rebel, and you will become part of the city itself, your flesh absorbed into its architecture." To walk these halls is to be surrounded by ghosts, their suffering immortalized in both art and rumor. The rebel from Shura fades from the living world before the day's end. It remains, stripped and displayed, turned to a cautionary silhouette under the desert sun. In the king's court, life continuous scribes finish their tablets, the priest blesses the ruler's name, and the executioner cleans his blades for the next act in the endless theater of Assyrian power. In the weeks following the rebel chieftain's execution, Shura falls silent. Once defiant city leaders now bend the knee, their tributes arriving on schedule, their petitions framed with the language of loyalty. The memory of the flaying lingers like a shadow over every council meeting, every whisper of dissent. For the Assyrians, the political effect is immediate and measurable. Intelligence reports passed along by merchants, spies, and subjugated officials show a drop in rebellious activity along the empire's western borders. Neighboring states, once tempted to test Assyrian resolve, hold back. The rebel's skin, nailed above Shura's main gate, becomes a landmark as notorious as it is grim, the kind of sight that turns visiting dignitaries pale and sends wordless messages to their kings. Inside the imperial court, the spectacle's value is celebrated. The scribes have already sent copies of the official record to other Assyrian governors, each tablet a blend of history and propaganda. The flaying is framed not simply as punishment, but as a divine act of justice, restoring harmony to the empire's cosmic order. Yet, there are subtler consequences as well. Among the people, fear ensures compliance, but it also breeds quiet resentment. Stories of the cruelty harden into legend, passed down in hushed tones around fire pits. Some accounts distort the event, painting the executioner as a supernatural figure or the victim as a cursed traitor whose death was inevitable. Others keep the focus on the king's merciless hand, cementing his reputation as both protector and destroyer. Beyond the empire's borders, the ritual's infamy spreads farther than Assyrian influence itself. Foreign scribes record the tales, blending fact with rumor until the flaying becomes a kind of cultural shorthand for absolute power. Even centuries later, when Assyria is only a memory, its enemies will remember it as a place where kings ruled with blades as much as with laws. In that way, the act achieves something that simple execution could never manage. It becomes both a moment in history and a permanent scar on the world's memory. Centuries pass, and the empire that once seemed eternal crumbles into dust. The palaces collapse, the stone reliefs are buried beneath sand, and the voices of its kings fade into silence. Yet the carvings that surviveth those stark images of bound men, the scribe's stylus frozen mid-stroke, still whisper the same warning they did in Nineveh's courtyard. The flaying rituals of the Assyrian kings were not random acts of savagery. They were deliberate, choreographed expressions of power, designed to outlast the moment, to live on in the minds of both subjects and enemies. In that sense, they succeeded. Even now, millennia later, their shadows linger in the pages of history, a reminder of how cruelty, when sanctified by the state, can become as enduring as stone. The wind over the ruins carries no screams anymore, only the faint rattle of dust in ancient doorways. But for those who know the stories, it's not hard to imagine the square, the canopy, the kings still gaze. It's not hard to hear the chant of this priest, or see the bronze blade glint in the sun. That's the true story most people never hear. What's your take on it? Let us know in the comments.